For over 100 million years, this insect has owned the planet. They watched the dinosaurs die. They survived 5 separate times when life on Earth essentially stopped. Ice ages froze the oceans. Asteroids smashed into the crust. Volcanic winters blocked out the sun. They lived through all of it. A falling rock from space could not break them. A guy in New Jersey did. He mixed up a chemical formula called DEET in 1946. But rewind the clock past 1946. Erase the chemical bug spray. Strip away the metal window screens. Forget those little plastic wall plug-ins that smell like fake lavender. For most of human history, we had absolutely nothing. You walked into the blind darkness with bare skin. You shared the night with 3,500 different types of the most successful assassin on Earth. So you have to ask the obvious question. How are we even here? Our ancestors had no drugstores. They had zero understanding of what a germ was. They slept outside next to a tiny bug that has wiped out more people than every war, famine, and natural disaster combined. Let the brutal math sink in. Roughly 100 billion humans have been born on this rock. About 50 billion of them were erased by mosquito bites. Half of us. Every second person who ever breathed was killed by a fragile creature you can smash with your thumb. It is not the second deadliest killer in human history. It sits entirely alone at the top. The other disasters do not even come close. The story of how we did not go extinct is not simple. It is wild. We fought back with everything we had. It took geography. It took fire and wet mud. It took beds made of burning leaves 77,000 years ago. It even forced our own blood to rewrite its code. An invisible bug redrew the entire map of human survival across Africa. And nobody at the time even knew it was happening. The original menu did not include you at all. 100 million years ago, they hunted very different prey. They tracked dinosaurs and massive reptiles moving slowly through thick, ancient swamps. We know this because of tree sap. 100-million-year-old Burmese amber trapped these ancient hunters perfectly, freezing them in time. Scientists even found dried, prehistoric warm blood still locked inside their tiny stomachs. 66 million years ago, a giant rock slammed into the earth and wiped out the dinosaurs. The mosquitoes lived. Their young hatched in temporary pools of dirty water while the rest of the ecosystem burned to ash. They simply refused to die. Only the females drink blood. The males drink plant nectar. They are completely harmless and totally irrelevant to this story. The females do not bite you because they are hungry for food. They bite because they are egg-making machines. Your blood holds the exact proteins they must have to build their young. Every single itchy bite you have ever felt was just a female trying to reproduce. She is not angry at you. She does not hate you. To her, you are just a walking protein factory. For a very long time, our ancient ancestors were completely ignored. We were not on the radar. That changed because of how we sweat. Humans leave a heavy chemical footprint in the air. We pump out heat. We exhale thick clouds of carbon dioxide. We smell entirely different from every other animal in the forest. Our sweat painted a massive red target on our backs. A 2026 genetics study tracked the exact moment this happened. Roughly 1.8 million years ago in Southeast Asia, certain mosquitoes mutated. They developed a brand new radar locked specifically onto human skin. The timing is completely brutal. That is the exact moment our ancestor, Homo erectus, started walking through that specific region in massive numbers. We showed up. We brought a weird new scent. A predator instantly rewired itself to hunt us. We have been paying for that biological trap ever since. They became obsessed. These tiny hunters even built backup heat tracking systems into their own heads. If one chemical sensor breaks, another takes over. They engineered multiple ways to guarantee they can always find your skin in the dark. We forced an insect to upgrade its hunting technology, and we never had a choice in the matter. Here's the first major survival trick. Our ancestors simply refused to live where the silent killer lived. In 2026, the journal Science Advances published a massive study. They looked at 74,000 years of data across Africa. They mapped where the deadliest malaria mosquitoes buzzed. Then they mapped where ancient humans actually built their lives. The two maps completely repelled each other. Where the damp soil hummed with bugs, human footprints vanished. Where the bugs faded, humans thrived. This was not a lucky accident. They were hiding. These people had zero microscopes. They had no idea what a parasite was, but they understood death perfectly. They watched it happen. The family that slept down in the wet, low valleys did not wake up. The hunters who set up camp near the stagnant water watched their children burn with fever and die. They learned the hard way. The valley kills you. That blood-soaked lesson turned into campfire stories. It morphed into invisible borders and strict warnings passed down to the young. Stay high up. Avoid the wet lowlands. You do not need to understand a biological mechanism to spot a brutal pattern. Action A leads to death B. Do not go there. Our ancestors were absolute masters of this survival math. Over tens of thousands of years, the planet shifted. The Earth dried out, then flooded again. The ghost towns of the mosquitoes expanded and shrank, and human populations ran from them. We moved our entire existence to dodge a bug. This massive game of hide-and-seek opened up new paths and sealed off others. It forced isolated tribes to finally meet. The genetic diversity of every single human alive right now was heavily shaped by our ancestors running away from a tiny, fragile insect. But running away only works until you run out of land. You cannot always hide in the dry hills. Water is where life is. So when our ancestors could not avoid the damp zones, they fought back with fire. A roaring campfire does not just give you light and heat. Thick smoke acts like a chemical wall. Female mosquitoes hunt by tracking your carbon dioxide and body heat. Smoke completely blinds their radar. The stinging ash and thick gray clouds scramble their sensors. You sit near the burning wood, you get fewer bites. They did not understand the exact chemistry of it. They just knew the invisible shield worked. And they took it further. Ancient humans across the globe did not just burn any random dead wood. They actively experimented. Somebody tossed a specific branch into the flames and noticed fewer bites. They told the next person. Generations of families tested and perfected this survival trick. Indigenous tribes across the earth built massive, localized arsenals of burning herbs. Aboriginal Australians threw sandalwood onto the coals. Communities across East Africa and Ethiopia burned sharp-smelling eucalyptus and wild basil leaves. In North America, the Ojibwe people built carefully designed smudges, slow-burning piles of sticks that choked out the bugs around their sleeping camps. Across Latin America, dried bark and thick herbs were burned inside homes right before sleep to clear the dark rooms. They ran these brutal, real-world trials without a single laboratory. But modern science finally caught up to them. A 2021 study threw neem, eucalyptus, and basil on a fire and tested the thick smoke against 2 species of mosquitoes. The results were staggering. The burning leaves dropped mosquito numbers by over 90%. More than a 90% reduction, using weeds that just grow wild in the dirt. The ancient people pulling these plants from the soil thousands of years ago did not need a white paper to tell them it was effective. They learned through stinging skin and raw observation. They built an invisible wall of smoke, and it kept them breathing for one more night. Then there was the mud. It sounds crazy until you actually try it. Covering bare skin in thick clay was a brilliant raw survival tactic used across multiple continents. It hits the bug with 2 different roadblocks. First, the physical shield. Baked mud creates a hard crust over the flesh. A tiny mosquito mouth part physically cannot punch through dry dirt to reach the blood underneath. Second, the chemical disguise. The thick paste totally locks in your sweat. It masks the very smell that draws them in. Your skin pumps out a specific chemical signal that screams you are human. Covering it up with wet earth turns that signal off completely. It is crude, but it works like a primitive heavy armor. Modern science now knows that your skin bacteria is the main reason you get bitten while the person next to you does not. Mud simply shuts down that bacterial broadcast. But archaeologist Lynn Wadley found something even more shocking in a South African cave. Deep inside Sibutu Cave, she dug up 77,000-year-old beds. These were not just piles of dirt. Early humans built these sleeping mats out of thick ash and crushed leaves. They specifically used the leaves from the Cryptocarya woody tree. Those leaves are packed with natural chemicals that kill insects on contact. They built smoldering beds of poison to protect their sleep. This was not a lucky guess. Someone noticed that sleeping on those specific sharp-smelling leaves meant waking up with fewer bites. They copied it. They taught it. It became a survival habit. They periodically burned the old beds to kill the bugs hiding inside, then built fresh ones. 77,000 years ago, long before writing, long before recorded history, humans were building chemical barriers out of crushed leaves just to make it through the night. Ancient Egyptians slept under fine woven mesh as far back as the year 400 BC. Wealthy elites hid from the biting swarms under these heavy, elaborate hanging nets. Fishermen in Asia wrapped themselves in their own fishing gear just to survive the night. Japan built wide, breathable mesh during the Edo period 4 centuries ago to survive the humid, buzzing summers. People across the planet who had zero contact with each other invented the exact same physical barrier. Today, a cheap piece of treated netting still stands as our absolute best defense against dying in the dark. But woven threads could only do so much. The swarms were everywhere. Malaria ruthlessly hunted the young. It slaughtered children before they could ever grow up. When a parasite specifically massacres the youth, nature reacts with terrifying speed. It forces a biological warfare directly into human DNA. Our genetic code still carries the deep evolutionary scars of this endless slaughter. The most famous weapon forged in this war is the sickle cell mutation. Nature offered a deeply agonizing trade. If a child inherits 2 copies of this mutated gene, it is a brutal death sentence. Their red blood cells collapse into rigid crescents. These deformed cells block veins, trigger blinding physical pain, and violently cut life short. But if a child inherits just 1 single copy of that exact same gene, the survival math flips completely. The blood cells warp just slightly. When the deadly malaria parasite invades that blood, it chokes. The unusual, suffocated cells trap and destroy the invader before it can multiply and kill. 1 single copy of a lethal genetic defect became an unstoppable biological shield. This microscopic armor was so incredibly effective at keeping humans breathing that it rapidly exploded across West African populations roughly 15,000 years ago. Let's go back to that massive 74,000-year study. Remember how our ancestors spent tens of thousands of years running away from the deadly wet valleys. Right around 15,000 years ago, that absolute rule finally shattered. Human tribes started walking straight into the most dangerous malaria-soaked zones on the planet and building camps. They stopped hiding. They survived the wet heat. The bugs were still there. The malaria was still deadly, but human DNA had mutated. That tiny genetic shift became an invisible shield. An entire massive chunk of Africa that was basically a biological death trap was finally unlocked. A mutation that kills children in one genetic form literally became a genetic passport to conquer new lands in another. And it did not stop there. The human body engineered multiple ways to cheat death. Over 500 million people today carry a specific enzyme flaw called a G6PD deficiency. In men carrying just 1 affected X chromosome, this chemical flaw builds armored blood that deflects the absolute deadliest strains of malaria. Thalassemia is a cluster of inherited blood defects scattered heavily across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Those are the exact regions where the swarms have hunted humans the longest. A completely different mutation stripped away a specific protein on the surface of red blood cells in people of West African descent. Because that one protein is gone. The Vivax strain of malaria literally cannot break into their cells. They are essentially bulletproof against it. Our immune systems did not just fight off a sickness. Over thousands of generations, the blood itself was completely redesigned. Our cells rebuilt their own chemical structures to become too tough to kill. Nature forces a brutal math upon us. To survive the swarms, evolution traded the severe pain of genetic defects for the right to keep breathing. If enough children survive with one mutated gene, nature will ruthlessly sacrifice the children who inherit two. It is a staggering, merciless equation. Yet this exact brutal math is the reason the human species is not entirely extinct. There is a deeply dark irony sitting right here. The fragile bug you crush without a second thought actively sculpted human DNA. It completely redrew the massive map of human borders. It toppled kings. It collapsed empires. The great pharaoh Tutankhamun fell. His mummified blood still holds the ancient parasite. Hippocrates tracked the burning seasonal fevers sweeping through ancient Greece. The Roman Empire collapsed. The buzzing swarms of the Pontine marshes drained its armies and turned rich lands into historical ruins. Global wars shifted. These tiny assassins slaughtered more soldiers than heavy artillery ever did across the American Civil War, World War I and World War II. When humans tried to cut the earth in half to build the Panama Canal, over 20,000 workers died. The buzzing swarms choked out the massive project in blood. Before heavy chemical sprays saved them, a creature weighing barely 2 milligrams dictated the rise and fall of human civilization. The deadliest animal in human history is not a lion. It is not a crocodile. It is not a great white shark. It is something you can crush flat with your palm. It is 2 milligrams of pure death. Its entire existence is built on 3 simple directives. Find standing water. Lay eggs. And if she is female, find human flesh. But ancient humans survived all of it. They did not just get lucky. They survived through a hardened accumulation of absolute brilliance. They packed up and ran from the wet valleys. They sat close to the burning smoke. They actively burned specific, sharp-smelling plants. They smeared thick, wet mud directly onto their skin. They built smoldering beds of poisoned leaves. They wove nets in the dark. And when every single one of those survival tactics failed, their bodies violently adapted. Their blood absorbed the crushing weight of millions of deaths and forced genetic mutations. They traded severe pain for a slightly better chance at keeping a heartbeat. We look back at ancient humans and think they were primitive. We imagine them stumbling blindly through a world they barely understood. But they were deeply brilliant. They were running a massive multi-generational test on survival, and the penalty for failing was death. The mosquito that lands on your arm tonight is a perfect biological machine. It has survived everything this planet could throw at it. But look in the mirror, we are still standing right here too. And that counts for everything.